Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenelle Riley, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversation with David Oyelowo. This is an actor who has spent the last few years racking up remarkable performances in films as varied as The Butler, to Selma, to last year's Queen of Katwe. He will be seen on screens this month in the film you just saw, A United Kingdom, which he also produced. Please welcome David Oyelowo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on another great movie. You are on quite the streak lately, actually. What's your secret?
Oh, gosh. Well, anyway, firstly, before I tell you all my secrets, thank you all for being here. It's wonderful. I know we have a lot of actors in the room. This is some of my favorite kind of Q&A to do because we all just get to bemoan how difficult it is to be an actor. But no, I mean, you know, my secret is I basically try to do movies and tell stories that I would want to see myself. And, you know, I have this rule for myself. I have the three Ps. It's the part, the project, and the people. And the part obviously is important. I want to continue to grow as an actor, so I try to put myself in situations where that would be the case. The project, is it something meaningful? Does it entertain? Is it something I would feel proud about putting into the world? But actually the thing that's most important to me is the people I get to work with, because I think that's the only way you become better as an actor, to place yourself in the hemisphere of people who are better than you at this craft that you never fully master. And the best way to get close to mastering it, if that's even possible, is to be around great artisans. And so, you know, I always try to place myself in fertile ground for that to be the case.
And I just read an interview with you where you said something that I absolutely love. Now, I hope you said it. I never should trust anything I read on the internet.
I'll let you know.
But you were talking about working with Ava DuVernay and Selma, and you said working with female directors have made you a better actor.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's true because they have a perspective and a point of view that I haven't had as much of as an actor, and I think most actors don't have as much of, because most of the directors you get to work with are male. A lot of them are white. I love white people. Let's not get it twisted. But that's just a truism.
Yeah.
And that's a very specific perspective. And we've seen so much of it that it's become the received perspective. And where I learned that really was on Selma, a film that I became a part of, or first came into my world when I first read the script in 2007. And went on this journey where I had this deep spiritual connection to the piece, felt called of God to play that role, even though the initial director didn't agree with God on that
Really?
issue. No.
So you overruled God?
Well, I don't know that well, he tried to and failed. But, you know, no, I was rejected by the initial director. But the film went through a white male director, a black male director, another black male director, before I had gained just enough notoriety as an actor to be able to suggest Ava DuVernay to direct it. And through the course of watching how the film transitioned in terms of what the film was, it really taught me a lesson about how the perspective of the filmmaker informs the film and informs even who the protagonist is, what the tone of the film is. You know, initially, Selma was the protagonist of the film was Lyndon Johnson. Dr. King was more of a peripheral character. And that's a reflection of the people who were in the driving seat of that narrative. And as those people came and went, the shift of who the protagonists were and where the focus was shifted. And by the time Ava DuVernay came along, an example being that, my interaction as Dr. King with Coretta Scott King in the film was a phone call. I never had a scene with her in the script before she came along. The roles that Oprah Winfrey and Lorraine Toussaint and Tessa Thompson played were minuscule to non-existent. And when Ava came along, she wasn't just interested in the politics, she was interested in the emotional topography of these characters. And so one of the scenes that is my favorite scene in the film, and a lot of people's favorite scene, is actually the scene between Dr. King and Coretta, where she confronts him about infidelity, and a beautifully written scene that was Ava's scene, and it's what a woman would be interested in relation to Dr. King. How did Coretta deal with that? And so, because she is female and African American and brilliant, she put that in. She made the female characters more three-dimensional. She wanted it to not just be a film about a man, but about the movement, which was very much had women as part of that movement as well. So, and what that did for me, going back to your initial question of how I have been a beneficiary of being under the gaze of female directors, Dr. King became more flesh and blood for having that emotional interaction with his wife, for not just being a man who is a leader and iconic, but, was part of a movement with these other brothers and sisters. And these were all things that she injected. And I think we would have failed in that film if all you came away with was an accentuation of the iconography of Dr. King. What you came away with, I had a young person say to me, I feel like I met Dr. King, and that's Ava, the nature of the script, the material I had been given to portray him before she came along. I don't think anyone would have come away feeling that. You would have just felt, okay, that's the guy who did the I Have a Dream speech, but now you feel like you feel the flesh and blood of him. And so with the United Kingdom, I had always wanted this to be an unashamed love story. And a lot of the directors who we talked to were white and male because they have the notoriety and that make financiers feel comfortable. And they were mostly interested in the politics. And that was just never what got me going about the story. And to have Amma, who is, of course, a woman and an unapologetic romantic and someone who is less interested in the politics, means that you get this. And a scene in the film that wouldn't exist if it wasn't a female director is one of my favorite scenes in the film you just saw, which is where my sister in the film and my aunt in the film confront Ruth about, well, you think you're going to ship up here and be our queen? And, I don't want to, it's not about disparaging a male perspective, but a man wouldn't, that's not the scene in your head. The scene in your head is Seretse and his uncle and but we cut between the two. And that, we are malnourished as an audience because so few women are getting to tell these stories. And those are just two instances where I get to be part of a film that is more complex and dimensional than it otherwise would have been.
Well, just in the last 2, maybe 3 years, you've worked with 5 female directors. And a lot of times you were instrumental in getting them the job. So, I mean, is this something that, you actively set out to do, or is it just, kind of a coincidence?
No, it's not a coincidence. Because, I'm a big believer in if you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And, if I have just enough notoriety to make a difference, then I have to do it. Otherwise, what's the point of complaining? So yes, you know, 3 of those films. Ava was someone I lobbied hard for to direct Salma, and I produced a film called 5 Nights in Maine that Maris Curran directed. Oh, thank you. And yeah, she was just a voice that I was very excited by, between her screenwriting and her vision for the film, and it's really tough as a woman to get people to take you seriously as a filmmaker. You know, you go into these rooms and, you know, people sort of nod politely, and they're basically taking the meeting to be able to tell their boss that, you know, we tried, and I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I just, you know, anyway, that's why I wanted to do that film. And then I wanted Amma for this film because of her perspective, because she did such a brilliant job with Belle, and I exercise my bias, you know, like other people do, you know, because that's really what we are. That's why we are perpetually having a white male protagonist narrative, is because a lot of the decision makers are basically hiring better looking, more younger versions of themselves to
It's so true.
to be in those movies. So I'm going to hire myself as a good looking version of me. With all my sisters directing.
You know, the story of Ruth and Seretse is so amazing. When I first sort of heard the log line of this movie, I assumed it was historical fiction, because otherwise, why didn't I know this story? I mean, how did you find it, and did you have sort of a similar reaction?
I did. You know, much to my shame, as a person of African descent, you'd think this is the kind of story I would know, and I didn't. It wasn't until I was presented with a book about 6-7 years ago by a producer who had bought the rights to it and felt like it would make a great film. And I just literally saw the image of them on the cover of this book, a book called Calabar that was written by Susan Williams. And this young man with a trilby and a trench coat, arm in arm with this beautiful woman set in the 40s. They clearly just seemed completely in love. And, you know, it was both familiar and foreign. You know, you know those images from the 40s, but not these two people together, and not this joyful and happy. And, you know, I was so intrigued by it. And, you know, the connection I had to it was, you know, having lived in Nigeria for 7 years, is where my parents are from, and I lived there from the age of 6 to 13, I was surrounded by black men who are very self-possessed, very interested in, invested in their community, you know, loved their wives as my father does, my mother. My dad taught me about how to love and how to be loved, and I know that to be true, but I just never saw it in movies. I never saw, you know, black men in that vein, let alone African black men. And so when I saw this story, I thought, well, this has to be. It just has to be, for all sorts of reasons. So yeah, that to me is the beauty of a film like this. So many people who otherwise wouldn't know this story now get to know this story. Even in Botswana, people don't know this story.
You're kidding.
No, because it's effectively a colony. So the history that's taught in schools is David Livingstone over Seretse Khama, and that's considering their son is the current president. You know, so the legacy of colonialism, the legacy of what you are fed as the more important history over the lesser history matters. You know, when we did Selma, I remember doing a screening in Selma, Alabama, a stone throw away from the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is the very bridge that they marched over to start the Selma March. And in a screening room not unlike this, at the end of the screening, a white lady at the back put her hand up, thanked us for making the film, because she said, I didn't know that happened here. And she lives in Selma, Alabama. This is a tiny little place. It's not, you know, And she didn't know that's what happened on that bridge. She didn't know that Sir Edmund Pettus was the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, the bridge that she goes over every day. And she didn't know that the acquisition of the Voting Rights Act happened right there at the beginning of it. And so again, who gets to tell the history? Who gets to decide what history is more important than the other? And, you know, for me personally, you don't want to ever make these films feel like spinach, like they are, you know, and purely about education. They can entertain, they can transport you, but they can also give you an insight as to who we are and where we have been as human beings.
The other thing watching the movie, once I realized it was true, was I was like, oh, well, this must end badly because otherwise I would have heard of these two. And it was so wonderful to see, you know, that they lived with each other for many years, had children, and, you know, lived what I assume was a very happy life.
Yeah, they did. They were in love. I mean, you know, one of the amazing things for me when I read the book is that even people who hated the fact that this interracial marriage was happening admitted that they're kind of in love. You know, and begrudgingly would sort of admit that. And that, to me, is I truly believe in the power of love. I mean, you know, I've been married for 18 years myself to a woman Thank you. To a woman I deeply love, and she happens to be white, but, you know, I honestly don't wake up every morning going, whoa, you're white! Oh my goodness. Whoa, okay. You know, we literally just fell in love. I mean, we were 17 and 18 when we first met, and I couldn't imagine my life without her in it. And, you know, these two people, Seretse didn't like white people. I mean, he had studied in South Africa, had faced a lot of racism, and, you know, then, you know, his uncle, who's very upset with him about marrying a white woman, actually sent him to the UK because, like, you're going to have to get over this white people thing because we are going to have to deal with them. So, you know, go to the UK, get you. And he didn't expect him to come back with, like...
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, it worked a little too well. But you know, and that's a very real syndrome. I mean, when I first introduced my then girlfriend to my dad, and I said, I'm going to marry Jessica. And he goes, one day she's going to wake up and realize you are black. I think she's aware, Daddy. Yeah. I think she's aware. But that was to do with his experience. You know, he had moved to the UK in the 60s and 70s and had faced terrible racism. You know, hot coffee poured on him, spat at, terrible things. And so he was projecting his experience onto me. And so, you know, in a bid to protect me, that was his point of view. But it hasn't happened yet. She hasn't woken up and go, whoa, my goodness. Yeah.
Speaking of your wife, Jessica, we should mention she's actually in the movie. She plays Lady Lily.
She does, yeah. She was a bit too good at that racist thing. Don't you think? I remember after a few takes, I was like, are you enjoying this? She, you know what? It's so funny. Jess and I have four kids, and in the film, a line that didn't make the cut, but at one point she says to her husband in the film, "Just think of their children." Oh gosh, yeah, that was fun. That was fun getting to do that with her.
We have a question from Nikki Jacobs. Oh, right there.
Hi.
Wants to know, what was the most challenging aspect of portraying your character in this film?
One of the most challenging thing, generally, and for me specifically, was just how much time they spend apart. And, you know, it's one thing to depict the love between two people when they get to be in close proximity. It's another thing where, you know, I'm doing a number of scenes back to back where I'm not with the person, and similarly for Rosamund in a sense, and the challenge of that is it not being sort of generalized, I'm in love and I'm in pain acting, but for it to be something that you hope the audience will feel to be true, that feeling of loss and loneliness and anger and frustration, and yet you still love the person, you can't wait to be with that person. Those for me, that was a challenge. The other thing was the accent was pretty tricky because he had a Botswana accent, but he had spent a lot of time in the UK, and the accents you see in this are, certainly for me, are antiquated accents. No one talks like that anymore, because the British side of it, the old accent was that this is the BBC and everybody talked like that. So he had that kind of delivery, but with a Botswana thing going on in there. And so when you're actually in Botswana shooting, you think, oh yeah, I'll listen to people, but now the base for English in Botswana has changed from being British to American. So what happened 70 years ago is that they would listen to the BBC World Service, and the Queen was who you aspired to speak like. Now they are watching American movies, American television, and so the cadence is more American. And so I literally was, even though I was in Botswana, having to go la 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 la, because otherwise it would sort of be this weird hybrid.
There's another
Thanks.
audience question from Audrey. And I want to know, because I know you just got done doing Othello on stage with Daniel Craig. You've done, so much Shakespeare. You did Nightingale, which is, just you. Yeah. Basically, you talking into a camera for 90 minutes. So it may seem sort of a silly question, but I think as an actor, you'll understand. How do you memorize your lines? I mean, do you find it difficult? Also, thank you. I love you. You're the best. That was Audrey saying that.
Hi. Oh, it's my cousin. That's why. No, it's not really. It's not really.
You're a good actor. You made me believe that. You sold that.
Oh dear. Yes, lines. I imagine a lot of you here are actors. There's no easy way. I mean, you're like a crazy person in your room, just doing it again and again and again and again. I mean, I remember, because as you said, I just played Othello, and I was there in New York in my apartment, and I was in an apartment where there were these big windows, and across from me was other apartments with other people living their lives, and it wasn't till 3 weeks in that I realized that people were probably thinking, who the hell is this crazy person? Because what I do to learn my lines is I walk up and down doing my lines, and I have my scripts, and I'm going, okay, and I jump up and down, and I do things that makes my body be doing one thing while my mind is doing something other, but because that's just the way it helps me. And one day I saw this lady watching me, and there was history to the way she was watching me. She was like, and I realized night after night I'd been walking up and down going, and then she's like, she thought I was crazy. But it is crazy, and it's crazy making, because, I remember, because I hadn't done a play for 10 years before doing Othello this time around.
Long? Yeah,
well, I have 4 kids.
I'm not judging.
Theater doesn't pay. I tell you that right now. It doesn't help with the babies. But so I hadn't done a play for about 10 years, and there was literally a point where I thought, I'm not going to know these lines before I have to be in front of people. And Daniel Craig played Iago in it, and he has a lot of lines as well. And I sent him an email, and I said, how are you doing with the line learning? And he sent me an email back saying, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. I was like, okay, not just me then. Anyway, carry on.
Have you ever tried any of the apps that they have now?
No.
Oh.
No. For me, honestly, the thought of being on stage and then thinking the app's doing the line, it's like I'm maybe I'm a bit superstitious or whatever. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
There's no shortcuts to and it may help some people, but literally you just have to, because the drilling of the lines is also part of the investiture in what you're about to do, the pummeling of the mind, the flesh. Why am I saying that? The scrutiny you're having to, because basically lines don't go in if you don't understand them. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to have them, your brain to suck them up, unless you're going, okay, that thought leads to that thought, that's why he's saying this there, that's why, and so, there's, like I say, there's just no shortcut. If the app works for you, bless your heart, but not for me.
And it happens to the best of us. Have you ever been on stage and lost your place or gone up on a line?
Thankfully I didn't with Othello, but I did once. I was at the Royal Shakespeare Company doing a play called Orinoco, no, you did not see Orinoco. You're just clapping for the sake of clapping now. But bless you. But I was doing this play Orinoco, and I walked on stage, and it was one of my best friends actually in the play with me. And I'll never fully forgive myself for what I did. I was on stage with him, and the lines completely, anyone who's done theatre, you're kind of going, oh, they're coming. Okay, that second felt like half an hour, but they're coming. Nothing. Nothing. And I literally looked him in the eye and walked off stage. Don't judge. You weren't there. You don't know what it's like. Listen. I felt awful. And I'm off stage in the wings going, what's he doing? And he was like, I was just awful. He's never let me forget it. But it hasn't happened since.
Another question from Savannah wants to know what your favorite part of production on the film was.
I'm a big fan of the edit. Because as a producer, that's one of the joys of being a producer on the film is, often as an actor, you finish the film and you hope that they do right by you and right by the film, and then you watch it along with a bunch of people and go, oh, okay, that's what we did. But, for this, I see cut after cut after cut, where we want to emphasize things. Do we need reshoots? Do we need, what the music should be? It's a fascinating process, because there are 3 stages to, a film becoming what it ultimately becomes. You pummel away in development in terms of the script and what you feel like what the story should be. Then when you're shooting it, new things present themselves, new focuses arise that are fascinating and feel like they earn their way into the film. Other things feel like they're less important. And then that happens all over again in the edit, where the film literally starts to speak to you. Things that you thought were really important just were not as important, and things that you sort of sidelined are the movie. Characters that you thought were smaller need to be more prominent. The ones that you thought should be more prominent are. I find that deeply fascinating, and it's one of the privileges that I get to have, even though I'm an actor, but as a producer.
And I assume you had a lot of say in casting?
I did, yes. I did. My wife's in it. I mean, come on. Let's be real, people.
Well, I know you had worked with Rosamund before in
Yes.
Jack Reacher.
Yes.
What made you think of her for this part?
I'd worked with Rosamund on a film called Jack Reacher, as you say, and had a very different kind of relationship with her in that. I electrocuted her in a lift. in that one.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. It doesn't ruin the movie. It's fine. You can watch it. But I really enjoyed working with her. And the thing I love about Rosamund is that you can't really, in your head, picture what a Rosamund Pike performance is going to be. Anyone who's seen Gone Girl knows that couldn't be more different to what she does here, thankfully. Yes. And she's a very enigmatic actress, and I felt that in order for us to buy this kind of love at first sight thing that actually happened between them. I mean, that was one of the toughest things for us when we made the movie, is that they fall in love really fast. And for a modern day audience, that can be a bit of a leap because we don't tend to get to see that. Maybe we're more of a cynical age, I don't know. But it's exactly what happened. And if that's going to happen, you need it to be an actress who you can buy why this prince is going to see her and hear her and be around her and go, I just need to be around you. And I feel like she has that enigmatic quality that makes that believable. And she's just a fantastic actress.
Is there any secret to chemistry? You guys have such great chemistry in this. I was thinking about Carmen.
Jogo, yeah.
Sorry, I always butcher that. I shouldn't have even tried.
That's okay. I will tell her that.
Yeah. But in Selma, I was thinking in Nightingale, you have great chemistry with yourself.
I love myself.
Yes. But is there a secret to that? Do you think it helps to know the person, or is it sometimes inexplainable?
You can't really plan for it. I mean, if you have a great eye like Ava does, I think that she was very much in the driving seat of feeling like Carmen and I would have good chemistry. We read together, and so we got to test that out in a sense. With Rosamund, we had known each other, and I wasn't about to ask her to come in and audition. So you just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you genuinely don't know. And I remember the moment where it felt right, and it was the very first day of shooting. It's a scene where, and you've just seen it, obviously, where I come home after I've been, going through the community, seeing that they're suffering from malaria, that there's this drilling going on, and I come home, put my bags down, she's home, and we run into each other's arms and we kiss. And that was the very first scene we ever did in the film. But what was very special about it is, you may not know this, but the house we shot in is the exact house they lived in. It was derelict, just sat there. Nothing was being done with it, and so we refurbished it and made it as close to as it was from the photographs we had. And there was something very magical about standing in front of the very fireplace that they stood in front of, standing in the very kitchen that we had photographs, seeing them sat there in that space at that dining table. And there was just something you can't quite put your finger on, and that's what chemistry is. But the combination of the location, who we are, how passionate we were about that story. I mean, how Rosamund came to the story is that I basically phoned her up, said that, I have something I want to send you, let me know what you think. And I sent her just images of Ruth and Seretse. I didn't even send her the script initially. She emailed me back within about an hour saying, I'm weeping here looking at these images. Who are these people? Tell me more. And so I sent her the script, and she was on board very quickly. And so, that was indicative of how she felt about them, which reflected how I feel about them. And I think that also goes into the chemistry, the fact that we were so desirous to do right by them.
And actually filming in Botswana, I don't know if people have memories of them, if you were able to meet any of their family.
Yeah. The way we met their son, who is the current president of Botswana, was kind of extraordinary. So the scene where Rosamund as Ruth goes to the store with Naledi, my sister in the film, and initially the women are very like, stay away, and she goes in and she gets what she's there to get. We were doing that scene, and we were doing her approach to the store, and I'm sat behind the monitor in sort of producer mode. I'm not in the scene, and then we hear this, and there's a helicopter just decides to land where we're shooting, and the president steps out of the helicopter unannounced, apparently for security reasons, and literally just comes and sits down next to me behind the monitor. And he has a presidential bearing, as you can imagine, and Amma calls action, and Rosamund starts doing her thing, and he just melts in his chair. And she calls cut, and he turns to me and says, "I never thought I'd see my parents again." That's how I met him. Looking like his father, she doing a brilliant job of portraying his mother, and he had only seen black and white images of that. His father passed away in the 80s, so he didn't get to know him deep into his life. He got to know his mother more. Ruth passed away in 2008, but that was a really meaningful moment for us, for him to acknowledge that we were getting something right.
And have they seen the completed film?
They have, and actually the film's release is synonymous with Botswana's 50th anniversary of independence. So it's been a big, so it's been a big part of those celebrations. So it's that's an added thing we couldn't have planned, but just a beautiful coincidence.
Sorry. Well, I didn't need that anymore anyway. We're going rogue here. You have played. It's funny to me because, like, my dad loves the movie Selma, and he refuses to believe the guy who played Martin Luther King Jr. is British, no matter how many interviews or other movies I show him. But you have such a facility with accents, and there's a question about, aside from your accent, which is amazing, your vocal work in this movie is so dexterous, and your addresses to your people. Can you tell us about your vocal training or any exercises you do?
Part of my training as an actor, I went to the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and what we were taught to do, is to really deconstruct an accent. And you are looking at, obviously, the people of the place, but also the landscape of the place. Great Britain is a smaller environment, and people in cities and in smaller environments like that, they have a more pinched way of talking, and bigger countries, their tongues are. I mean, this stuff actually makes sense. I know it sounds crazy, but your tongue gets kind of flatter and bigger the more that you're in a bigger place, and then when you're British like me, you're very pinched, and you everything's a bit more like that. So actually, there are clues in where you are as to the Botswana is a very vast kind of, and so the people are very much more like this, whereas if you're in Lagos, Nigeria, people are everything is very musical and very punched and pinched and like that, and then you look at the history of I genuinely do this. It sounds so crazy to talk about it the way I'm talking about it, but it's true. You look at the history of how an actor, so like I say about Seretse, he was from Botswana, but studying in South Africa, and then lived in London. Dr. King was from Atlanta, but he studied a lot in Boston, and so some of the weird sounds he makes are Boston sounds. And then there's the Southern Baptist preacher, and then there's his love of reading and the books that he read, where he got those big words. You're sort of putting together how he talks the way he does. The fact that the African American way of talking is born out of West Africa. So, as a West African, it's very musical. Everything kind of talks like, my father, this is the way he would talk to you. So if you have someone who talks like this back in Nigeria, and then what you do to this accent when you're going to do an African American is that you sort of slow everything down a bit more, because you have slavery and people are telling you not to talk and things like that, and then before you know it, you're kind of talking like this, and it literally you can hear those sounds. I can hear West Africa in an African American accent in a way that you probably don't realize it's there. So that's all part of putting it together.
And obviously this story is set in the 1940s, but in some ways kind of feels timelier than ever. Was that something you were conscious of when you were making it, or is it sort of, again, coincidence?
I think a film like this is, yes, timely, but it's also timeless. Having just done Othello, a 400-year-old play with a very different kind of interracial marriage that ends very differently. But that's 400 years ago. This is 70 years ago. We see Seretse being banned from going back to his country on the basis of marriage in the film, and we see what's happening today. So it's, for me, one of the main reasons I love doing films like this is because I truly believe that prejudice is born out of ignorance. It's born out of the not knowing, the fear of what you don't know, and people who are not you, who don't look like you, who don't share your background. And so, I am absolutely dedicated to the contextualization of the Black experience in cinema, because I think if you get to see the complexity of who someone like me is, beyond being a slave, a domestic servant, a criminal, or a sports star or musician, then there's a real chance that there will be a greater level of understanding, and that even beyond that, you may see yourself in me. And I think that if that happens, we're on the way to something.
I don't think I can top that, so I'm just gonna remind people that the movie opens in limited release on February 10th before going wider the following week. It's actually a great Valentine's Day movie, so it's perfect timing. Again, congratulations on another beautiful film. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys for being a great audience.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.